to get going. Welcome everyone to our next Ask the Professionals. Probably the last one I think for this year, but we've got next year's jam-packed. This one is on testing with ARIA, and we've got some amazing presenters with us today. So to just a little bit of background before Russ gets into moderating and sharing the introductions. I'm Bree Norton, I'm co-chair of OZeWAI. We're a professional membership organisation. Used to be a conference, but now we actually a membership. It's been like that for a couple of years, so please consider joining in little as $50 annually. We run these events monthly, and we've got some really great ideas for next year as well. Especially around leadership and AI and anything else that Ricky comes up with, who's joined us today. So what I might do is hand it over to Russ, who will do the acknowledgement of country, and ask everyone to do their intros, and we'll kick it off. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Bree. Yeah, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we might be meeting today, and pay our respects to elders past, present, and those that may be on the call. In my case, I'm on the lands of the Camaragal people in Sydney. So if you know the traditional owners of lands that you happen to be on, feel free to share in chat. I'm sure I know that quite a few other people will be on the same land as me because they're based in Sydney. But, and a quick intro, my name's Russ Weakley. I'm head of training at Intopia, but it's not about me today. It's about our three wonderful guests. So I'm going to throw to each of them to do their own intros. And if it's okay with you, Sarah, I might start with you. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
I did it again. Oops, I did it again. First of all, thank you so much for having me today. It's an honor and a pleasure, and it's good to see you, Russ, and everybody else. So yeah, my name is Sara Soueidan. You can pronounce it Sarah or Sara, whatever way you want. I'm a front-end developer. I've been doing this for almost a decade now, basically. I started in 2012. I started focusing on accessibility in 2016, so that's almost 9 years now. How I got into accessibility was honestly by chance. There was a little bit of guilt and a little bit of self-shame included. So when I started this career, I was very much focused on making sure that I create inclusive websites and applications. I focused a lot on progressive enhancement as a strategy, and inclusive strategy, performance optimization, because you want to make sure that everyone, air quotes, everyone can access or use the applications or websites that you're creating, the user interfaces. And if you're using progressive enhancement, you're ensuring that everyone can use it, even if they don't have JavaScript enabled. If you're optimizing for performance, you're making sure that people on slow connections can access it. But the first few years when I got into this field, I didn't even know what accessibility was. I hadn't heard of accessibility before, until at some point, I think around 2016 or so, it started popping up in my Twitter back in the days timeline. I was really curious because I think something came somewhere. I read somewhere that if your websites or the user interfaces that you're building are not accessible, then they're not really good. You're not doing a good job. And that one hit me because I was really proud and I thought I was doing a really good job building the interfaces that I was building, until I realized that I started digging and learning a little bit more about what accessibility is and what it means. And that's when I realized that some of the websites that I had been building for clients were not entirely accessible because I didn't know better. And so I started digging deeper and deeper into accessibility. That's what got me interested in accessibility. And the more I got into it, the more I fell in love with it, because accessibility benefits everyone. It's primarily for people with disabilities, but everyone benefits from it. And when you're focusing on accessibility, you're making the user interfaces that you're building for people, you're actually making them inclusive of more people, a wider range of people. And that's the whole purpose of what you're doing, right? You're building user interfaces. And if you're not building, if you remove the user from user interfaces, then you're not really doing a proper job. And that's how I got into accessibility. I started focusing a lot more on it and building accessible projects for my clients until in 2022, I think. That's when I started focusing a lot more on education, and then I started working on an accessibility course, and that's where my focus is today.
Ooh, thanks for sharing. And by the way, if you feel free to put something in chat if you want to plug your amazing course as well. What about you, Raf? What quick intro from you?
Oh, Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm accessibility tester at AccessibilityOz. I've been working for AccessibilityOz for over 10 years. I started my interest in accessibility partly, no, first of all, I'm blind, so I use assistive technologies. But then, after graduating from my studies, I worked at the University of Gdańsk, where I trained students with disabilities how to use assistive technologies. Then I moved to Ivona Software. You may not know Ivona Software, but certainly you know Amazon. Amazon acquired Ivona Software, and it's the company that makes, for instance, Amazon Echo voices. So I worked there. Then I worked for a company that made navigation GPS for people who are blind, and then I moved to AccessibilityOz. So I do screen reader testing, accessibility testing, general testing, things like that.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. Andrew, quick intro from you.
Okay, I'm a psychologist by training and inclination, but somehow about 30 or probably even 40 years ago, I was getting more and more focused on technology, both for my own purposes. Like Raf, I'm also blind. So for completely selfish reasons, I took a strong interest in emerging technologies. Most of my HTML knowledge, such as it is, started about 30 years ago when I was working for TAFE New South Wales. And I had formal and semi-formal and informal input from some very knowledgeable colleagues on HTML. And then I met a bloke called Russ Weakley. Don't tell him how good he is, but he introduced me to some of the finer points of CSS, which was very important. And about 10 years ago, I was getting frustrated with people coming to me with educational quizzes and saying, is this quiz accessible? And each time I just say no. So I thought, well, I better write some examples. And I'd never written JavaScript before, so I started to write JavaScript. And I chose the wrong time because my mentor on a lot of this sort of stuff is away on holidays. But I'm now reasonably competent with fairly basic JavaScript. I'm currently working 1 day a week only, because I'm lazy, for University of Technology Sydney. And there I work in the accessibility unit, providing information to students about any technology that can be relevant to them, which can include a lot of online stuff, but also purpose-built equipment and general equipment that happens to be useful. So I think that's enough about me.
Cool. Thanks for that. Thanks all of you. And it's great to have you all here. So today we're going to be talking about ARIA. I don't know whether that's a shock to you all, but that's the aim of today. And so we've got some pre-prepared questions that we're going to go through, but we'd love questions from any of you. So just add them to the chat and Bree will then sort of collate them and put them into a doc that we've got our access to. So we'd love to hear your questions. So, there's plenty of time. There's no pressure. We've got a bunch of questions to kick things off, but we want questions from you. So I want to start with the very first question, which is, I'm going to start with Sara for this one, but as always, both of you feel free to chime in as well. ARIA can be powerful, but it's often used inappropriately, or as we all know, vastly overused by people who don't know what they're doing. What are some of the examples where ARIA is the only appropriate solution?
Okay. In order to answer this question, a step backward. So in order to understand where ARIA is the only appropriate solution, I like to talk about what ARIA, not exactly, okay, I'm not going to make this too long of an answer. I'll try. But basically what ARIA is and isn't, and what ARIA does and doesn't, is going to help us get to the answer of this question, because ARIA is, first of all, the too long, no, it doesn't work here because we're not reading anything. The short answer is ARIA is the only solution where HTML semantics fall short. So if you're trying to create a UI pattern and there is no HTML element, for example, that represents that specific pattern or component that you're creating, then you're going to need ARIA. ARIA is a set of attributes, HTML attributes, that you can use to give meaning or augment HTML semantics. If you're creating a UI, for example, when you're creating a button element, when you're creating a button component, you have a button element in HTML. It comes with implicit semantics built into it. It comes with implicit ARIA roles also added to it by the browser by default. In that case, if you're using the native HTML element, you don't need to use ARIA. You're going to need to use ARIA when you're creating a specific type of a button that the native button is not sufficient for. So for example, say that you're creating a press button, a button that when you press that button, such as a pause button or a play button, when you press that button, it's either in the press state or in the regular state, not press state. There is no state attribute in HTML that communicates to screen reader or assistive technology users that this is a press button, and that also communicates the current state of that button, whether it's pressed or not. In that case, that's where you would resort to ARIA to fill in that gap. So you would use the native button element and you would add the ARIA pressed attribute to it, which communicates when you add ARIA press to a button. In a lot of accessibility APIs, it's going to be exposed as a press button. So assistive technologies were going to expose it to their users as that. And the state of the attribute, which you are going to have to update using JavaScript, is going to communicate whether the button is currently pressed or not. So you will need to use JavaScript to complete the functionality of the press button that you've created. Why? Because ARIA only communicates semantics. That's all it does. Adding an ARIA role or a state or a property to an HTML element does not add the behavior associated with that role. If you add role button to a div, which is the most common example we usually use, it doesn't turn that div into a button. It only tells screen reader users or assistive technology users that this thing is a button. So you've essentially made a promise. I love my friend Scott O'Hara's way of explaining this, because when you add an ARIA role to an element, you're making a promise to assistive technology users. If you say this div has role button, then you're promising them that this is a button and that it's going to function as a button. But the div doesn't come with that built-in functionality, so you're going to have to add that functionality yourself using JavaScript. That's all ARIA does. It only adds semantics. It augments meaning that is implicit in HTML. You augment it using ARIA attributes. You have roles, you have states, and you have properties. You will need to use ARIA for things like, basically, if you're creating, for example, a toolbar, there is no HTML element that represents a toolbar, so you will use the role toolbar in ARIA. Currently, we still don't have an HTML element that represents a tabs widget, so we use the tab list and the tab panel roles in ARIA. So you will need it to create components that don't exist in HTML yet. You will also sometimes need it for other things. I'll try not to get into too many examples here. One of them is, for example, providing an accessible name to certain elements that can only have one if you're using ARIA. One of the recent examples or the recent updates that happened to the accessible name computation algorithm is the figure element. So the figure element used to get its name from its fig caption, and then that no longer happened. The fig caption was being exposed as additional details to the figure, but then that also changed because you could have examples where the fig caption is way too long, and if a screen reader is going to announce the contents of the fig caption as additional information to the primary content of the figure element, then it's going to create a very verbose and pretty much a really bad user experience. So what they ended up doing in the specification is that the figure element currently does not get an accessible name unless you give it an accessible name using ARIA Label or ARIA Labeled by. Another current example, which might change in the future, is if you have an article element or another sectioning element, such as this section element. If you want to expose the section as a region, promote it to a region so that screen reader users can use their shortcuts to get to that section more quickly, you also give it an accessible name, either using ARIA Label or ARIA Labeled by. I'm excluding the title attribute because it's generally best practice not to use that, so I'm removing that completely from the discussion. So there's that. And then there is basically giving accessible names to elements. There's also another example with radio groups, because you cannot mark a group of radio buttons as required, or you're going to need to use ARIA required instead of the required attribute because of markup restrictions. So basically, ARIA is a polyfill for HTML semantics. You will try to use semantics, HTML, as much as possible to get the foundations right. And when you need more semantics that is not available in HTML, that's where ARIA is going to be necessary. I hope that was
fantastic answer. And would you say that ARIA is almost like a polyfill, isn't it? Because there's things like the details element and the dialogue element that are gradually coming in. So hopefully over time, a lot of them get replaced with native solutions.
Yes. So the whole point when we talk about ARIA being a polyfill is we're implicitly trying to encourage developers not to resort to ARIA from the start. So the first rule of ARIA use is to avoid using ARIA if you can use an HTML element instead. So when there are enough HTML elements that replace the ARIA attributes or roles that we need, then we're going to be using those instead. And we'll only resort to ARIA when there are gaps in implementation or stuff like that.
Yeah, love it. Cool. Do either of you want to add to this? I think it was the perfect answer on those, but Andrew or Raf, any additional comments before we move on?
Just a few, and it won't be nearly as eloquent as what Sara just did. Back in 2017, I presented a paper at the OZeWAI conference, and I called the paper ARIA, the path to eternal accessibility salvation, or the path to eternal frustration. I guess that's where I come to with ARIA, when used well, it's a beautiful thing, and when, as is so often the case, it's used badly, it just frustrates me, because I'm either getting locked out of information I should get, or I'm getting extreme verbosity. So
sure.
So I find that a bit frustrating. I'm going to drop something in the chat in a minute when I'm not talking, so I can actually do one thing at a time. And it's the first rule of ARIA, which Sara touched on, which is the first rule of ARIA is do not use ARIA when a native HTML element will suffice. And it's really important because people are using it a lot these days when really they should be using native HTML.
Yeah, hold that thought, because the next question is actually for you on the opposite of what just Sara said.
Right.
Before we move on, because I'll come back to you in a second,
Yes,
Andrew.
okay.
Raf, any comments on the first question, or shall we move on?
Oh, just a short comment, because generally Sara described the situation beautifully, I'd say. But the situation was not always so simple. I'd say about landmarks, because generally you shouldn't use ARIA when you can use HTML. But I remember the times that ARIA roles for navigations and for other landmarks were better supported by assistive technologies than HTML landmarks. It changed now, so now it's actually there's no need to use for instance navigation role, etc., because landmarks, HTML landmarks work really well. They are well supported by screen readers, for instance. But there was a time that when it was different, and the recommendation was that even if you use HTML 5 landmark, you also should use a role for instance.
I remember that time too. Yeah, cool. Okay, let's go on to the next question. And I'll start with Andrew, but obviously you've all been scarred by ARIA. So this is a chance to, vent those frustrations and any PTSD you've got from ARIA as well. But for Andrew to start off with, conversely, sorry, literally just my child just started ringing me. Conversely, what are the most common ARIA anti-patterns you encounter, and how do you explain to teams how they're not helpful or harmful? So like things like overuse and bad use of ARIA. And I'll start with Andrew, because I know you have strong opinions on this.
Yeah, I think my most hated one because it comes up so often is the menu and menu item. Used out of context almost every time it's used. Those, are they roles or states? So people often put menu at the top of a navigation list, and then they'll put menu item for each item in the list. And that does a couple of things. First of all, it adds verbosity. So every item that I arrow to says menu item, menu item, ... and it drives me mad. If you put menu on the UL of your list, then screen readers, I think it works in Firefox, but in Chrome, the links just don't work. The screen reader says, well, that's not a link, it's a menu. And it doesn't do anything with it. So at best, it adds verbosity, and at worst, it can actually stop the screen reader from activating the links. It also means that I can't navigate to the next menu item quickly. Sorry, the next list item quickly with a screen reader command, because again, the screen reader says, well, it's not a list, it's a menu. So that's probably one of my more hated ones. Another one that irritates me a bit, but not as much, is the role equals alert. Only because it's used really when it isn't necessary. I think my favorite ARIA facility is ARIA live equals polite. I love that one because
so do I, because it's polite.
Yeah, well, it's polite. Yes. It's completely unlike me, but for some reason I like it. It works really nicely, and so if you pop some information up and you want the screen reader user to know about it, which you almost always would, then you don't have to jump to that spot, because the screen reader will present the information with ARIA live equals polite. You could equals ARIA live equals, what's the other one?
Assertive or off.
Yeah. I found in my testing that it really isn't necessary. But the role equals alert just gets messy, because for every time I get prompted with that one, it says alert, alert, alert. And it really should be used only if there's something crucial about to happen. You're about to be logged off, or your house is on fire or something. It really needs to be something that you really have to attend to straight away. There's one website I can think about where it actually says alert 3 times every time you change pages, and it gets pretty tedious. So how do I tell developers about that? I think I shout at them. I think that's probably how I start off. Demonstration, I think, is the most effective way. Just let them run a screen reader by it and just hear this thing babbling on like that, and saying it doesn't have to be like that. Yeah.
Also, your lived experience is vitally important here, because a lot of developers have theoretical knowledge. You've got like street cred in that you're having to experience it every day.
Yeah.
I want to bring up an old wound, but do you remember back in the dark ages when developers suddenly discovered role equals application and the pain that caused?
Yeah, and I'll probably come to that one a bit later, but that is another one that gets overused, well, completely misused. For those who aren't familiar with it, it's supposed to be used if that portion of the website is, I think I'm using the right word, emulating, an application. So it's pretending not to be a web page. I think, is that a reasonable description?
Yeah, that's good enough.
Yeah. But I'm fine. It's cropped up where I work at the moment. They've stuck it on a section where I need to get someone's name, and because they've stuck it on there, I can't get the person's name.
Can you just quickly explain for people why it impacts you, though? Because it's really important people understand it.
What happens, because the screen reader I'll go back one step. When we're looking at a web page, the screen reader has two modes, and the different screen readers have slightly different names. We'll talk about browse mode and focus mode if I'm using NVDA, forms mode for JAWS. So if I'm just navigating the website, I'm in browse mode, and I can use keys such as H for the next heading, T for the next table, and so forth. If I need to fill out an edit field, then I have to drop into forms mode, focus mode. So if someone puts role equals application on an element, then the screen reader will drop into focus mode, forms mode. So that means I can't use the facilities, the HTML on the page. And I'll come back to an example of that perhaps a bit later, I think, because I've probably set it up for now.
No, that's good. It's a really good example.
It really can completely block access.
Yeah. It's a really good example of how bad it can go. Yeah. Raf, have you experienced sort of really anti-patterns or bad ARIA that's affected you personally as well?
Oh, I will tell about my professional experience. So the most frequent issue, in my opinion, is ARIA label used incorrectly.
Okay. Yeah.
My impression is that developers who do not know anything about ARIA, they know ARIA label and use it.
Very true. So, sad but true.
Yes, quite often I meet links with really good link texts where this text is replaced with ARIA label. In good situation, ARIA label repeats the link text, which of course makes no sense. There's no need for that. In a bad situation, that the ARIA label is completely different. So,
isn't it?
I'd say, and another thing is ARIA live used incorrectly. So ARIA live, the assertive instead of polite.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Have you also seen where people go gung-ho and they have link text, ARIA label, and then just for good measure, let's throw in the title attribute as well. And so the ARIA label will cross out the link text, but you've got then this third item sort of coming in as well. So yeah, people just throw everything at the wall, don't they? What about you, Sara? What have you experienced as sort of like bad ARIA patterns out there?
Actually, what Rafal and Andrew already mentioned were the two at the top of my mind. I think that most misuse or overuse of ARIA usually is under one of two categories, either misunderstanding of ARIA attributes and how they work or what they do, and ARIA label is the perfect example of that, or well-intentioned mistakes, and using live regions is an example of that. So with ARIA label, a lot of developers don't understand that in the accessible name computation algorithm, ARIA label is going to override the contents of the button or the link if you're using it on a button on a link. So what they end up doing is they end up using ARIA label to provide instructions on how to use this link or what this link is going to do. Instead, they think that what they're doing is they're helping screen reader users understand the purpose of the link, but they don't understand the effect or the impact of using ARIA label on the link and how it affects total or overall understanding of what's happening. And live regions is an example of well-intentioned misuse of ARIA, because I think that most developers who use live regions have an idea of what they do. They basically announce to screen readers what's happening or what's going to happen or what already happened. So they think that screen reader users need all of these live regions because they need the help that they think that the live regions is providing for them. But sometimes, as Andrew mentioned, demonstration is the best way to explain to them that this is a bad idea, because unless you fire up a screen reader and you hear what's happening and what it's announcing and how live regions are affecting the screen reader experience, then you're not going to know what's going to happen. You may end up, some developers can end up having 3, 4, 5, 6 live regions on the page, and they all announce, some of them assertive, some of them polite, and they interrupt the user experience, and they don't know because they didn't even fire up a screen reader to try to test how it affects the screen reader experience. So yeah, I don't have much to add on top of what Rafal and Andrew said. Their experience definitely trumps mine here.
No, that's great. Something you touched on there, mentioned it twice, and I'm glad you did, because it's my favorite thing on earth, which is a computation thing. I think every developer on earth should read that and understand it. It's so central to how everything operates. And one of the things I love about Chrome and its developer tree in the accessibility tree is it shows you how they're placed and the order and where they're crossed out. It's got a live tool that shows you how they work, but developers just don't think about it. So my message, if anyone, would be open up Chrome, inspect element, go to the accessibility tree and click around and look at the computation live and how things get crossed out and which one wins. So love that you brought that up.
Thank you. A lot of developers don't even know about the accessible name computation, and I'm surprised to see that many developers don't even know about the accessibility pane. They don't know that they can see so in my course, there's an entire chapter on that, and there's a chapter on accessibility tree. And I've read comments from people saying that they didn't know that they have this tool, they have this tool at their disposal in the browser, and it's right there, and it's
so beautiful.
Yes,
it's poetry, isn't it? Yeah, and by the way, it's available in lots of them. You've got it available in Firefox as well. I don't know about you, but what I love in Chrome is it actually shows you the order and shows you when things are crossed out. So it actually is a learning tool as well. But
exactly.
Yeah, love it. Let's move on. What ARIA is, what ARIA isn't and how it's misinterpreted. Well, this is a very odd question. I don't know how it's worded. What ARIA isn't and how it's not misinterpreted what it is. That is the strangest worded question ever. But I've got your name against it, Sara. Could you unpack that double negative question?
So I actually love this because one of the reasons ARIA is misused is because it's misunderstood. Yeah. So it's important to explain what ARIA isn't so that you can avoid ARIA misuse. ARIA isn't a replacement for HTML. It is not a magic thing that you use. Again, this is going to bring me back to the OpenAI now recommending in order to make I don't like ChatGPT, I don't like OpenAI, I don't like AI in general. So I'm going to be a little bit biased here. But one of the worst advice that I've seen recently is when OpenAI was recommending developers to use ARIA in order to make their websites accessible. And a couple of weeks or so before that, I came across an article, which I'm pretty sure was written by AI at this point. What you took away from that article is that ARIA is the way to make websites accessible. So instead of focusing and encouraging developers to use HTML, which is literally the foundation of accessibility on the web, you can't have an accessible web without HTML, without proper HTML. Because, someone might argue that, I could use divs and spans and use all of the ARIA in the world and add JavaScript and to turn this div and span soup into something that is understood by assistive technologies. But the thing is that not all assistive technologies will rely on ARIA to communicate this or to present the user interface to their users. And one example of such assistive technology is forced colors modes. And in forced colors modes, even if you use the button role on a div, it's not going to be so. The way I have a lot to talk about here. So the forced colors modes, I'm going to try to simplify this in my head first so that I can communicate it better. So what forced colors mode does is it looks at the DOM, it looks at the HTML that you've written. And for many or most semantic HTML elements, there is a color, a system color that maps to that element. So if you use a button element, the browser or a forced colors mode is going to map the styles of that button. It's going to use the background color as well as the foreground color for buttons that are specific for buttons from the system colors. But it's not going to do the same for a div that has the button role because forced colors modes does not care about ARIA. So even if you could use ARIA to make some elements more understandable or communicate them better to assistive technologies like screen readers, you're still going to be missing out on other assistive technologies because you have so many different kinds of assistive technologies. So it is very important to understand or to explain what ARIA isn't, and that's by explaining what ARIA doesn't do. I don't know if that answers the question or if I should go on.
No, that's great. And you've touched on something that I'm glad you brought up. Even though we've got two amazing people who are blind here, screen readers are just one of many types of assistive technologies interacting with websites. And while ARIA is great for particularly screen readers, it doesn't help, people using Zoom text or magnification of the page or, voice control. Or there's a million other ways that people might be interacting with your content. So fantastic. What about Andrew and Raf? Any comments on that as well?
I have a comment on. Okay, go on. I can wait.
I was going to say, I think Sarah's pretty much covered it. Um, no, I think I'll leave it.
Cool. Raf?
Okay, I wouldn't fully agree on AI criticism. Of course, if you ask general questions, it may be misleading, but it's really good when you ask about, for instance, ARIA attributes, what they do, etc. And I know developers who are trying to fix accessibility issues. So they often ask AI, and they get good answers. The problem is that it may lie when you
Yes.
ask if something is correct. For instance, a friend of mine did a simple test. He sent to various AI tools a question whether the code is accessible, and it was just a link where text was replaced by ARIA Label. And only one tool, I think it was Gemini probably, but I'm not 100% sure now, explained why this idea isn't good. There was one more which was almost correct, but other tools answered that it's fine. So the situation is changing, and I wouldn't criticize AI, and I'd say that it's a very useful tool when you use it carefully.
That's a good answer. And I love that we've got a bit of different views here. That's good. Some of you are probably too young to remember, but there was a breed of developers who used to be called Stack Overflow developers. Does anyone know what I mean? So what the Stack Overflow developers would just live in a world where they had Stack Overflow open beside them, and they would just constantly be just searching for answers in Stack Overflow. And in some ways, it was important. They learned how to ask questions well. So ChatGPT's taken over that sort of thing. I think the one caveat is, to me, all these sort of things are, any sort of LLM is fundamentally like a very arrogant white male who always thinks they have the right answer and sometimes is very wrong. So if we always assume that ChatGPT is like an arrogant white male and take everything it says with a grain of salt, we'd be in a better world. I don't know whether anyone would agree with that, but Andrew, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just a couple of quick things that have come to me. I find, just on the AI thing, I found it very helpful with some of the newer implementations of JavaScript. I found it very helpful. And I think it's helpful if you have a basic understanding of what you're trying to achieve. And if the answer works and you understand why it works, I think that's helpful. But I was talking to a friend recently who was using one of the AI tools to learn about ARIA, and I thought, oh, that's very risky. If you don't fundamentally understand what it's doing and you're just getting information randomly almost, then I think there is a grave risk uh, of getting it wrong with your AI tools.
Totally. Now, I can probably tell what Bree would be thinking right now. Bree particularly told us, don't talk too much about AI because we're having a whole session on that coming up.
That's
So let's
true.
pause the AI conversation. I should just answer one thing, by the way. I'm not a real human. I'm just actually AI. This is not, I'm just an avatar. So I'm not even real. But let's move on and pretend that I am a real human. The next question I've got, and it's for Raf initially, but love all your answers. So, what are core testing steps that you follow when checking whether ARIA is implemented correctly? Raf first, and then others.
Okay, so I usually start my tests with screen reader testing. So when I, for instance, test a page with a screen reader, I automatically catch most of the ARIA issues because you can hear how screen reader announces certain elements, etc. And for the rest, I either look for a code or use some add-ons. So these are the things I do. So my answer is quite simple and boring.
That's okay. Andrew? Sarah, my bias is the accessibility tree. I use it all the time. It's my beautiful,
I was going to
beautiful
say
tool.
that.
Sorry.
I was going to say that. No,
You
so
go away.
this is, I thought that my methods were very, very primitive, is I look at the code first. I also look up the ARIA roles and the ARIA specification because it helps a lot. It tells you what's allowed and what's not allowed, and which roles to use with other roles, where names are allowed. Well, but this may not be in the ARIA specification per se. Well, yes, that is. So it tells you, the relationship between ARIA roles, and you have the accessibility children, whether you can have an element between this element and the other element or not. And I use the accessibility tree too. I love it. I mean, it's perfect.
Fantastic. I'm glad because I feel alone in this world. So I think that the lesson learned here, we're fighting for the accessibility tree. It's a beautiful tool. Andrew, what about you?
Well, you tried to introduce me to the accessibility tree once, and I find it I better not use that word. I found it really difficult to get to.
Well, it's a terrible thing for a screen reader to navigate to. It took Andrew and I half an hour to even get there, but
I need to revisit it. I tend to, I digress, but very quickly, I tend to use Firefox when I'm writing JavaScript because it's much easier to get to the place where it shows me my errors, and there's plenty of them. It's much easier than in Chrome for me, but I really need to sort that one out. I'm a bit like Raf. To test whether it's working, I just see what the screen reader presents.
Which is a great way to do it.
Yeah. That'll usually pick it up. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, the next one. Oh, now we're getting into interesting ones. What automated tools do you trust to test ARIA, and where do they fall short? There's no one name against this, so all of you, anyone. Maybe start with Sarah.
As I just mentioned, I'm more of a primitive person. I don't use a lot of automated tools. I used to use them a lot on client projects when I was testing client projects and auditing. I used to use Xcore, which is one of the most popular ones. But right now, I focus more on manual testing than I do on automated testing. So I don't really, where do they fall short? About false positives or false negatives. But I'm not really sure about which ones are more specific to ARIA per se. I don't use automated testing tools as much as I used to before.
No, that's cool. And they've all got their own perks. I'm going to ask a strange question. Thumbs up if you've ever heard of Bobby and used Bobby. That'll show people's age. Sarah's shaking her head. Oh, you'd have to be old to know what that tool is. Raf or Andrew, what about you?
Yeah, that's me. I remember Bobby. Yeah.
We're talking about the early 1920s, just after the First World War.
Now you've thrown me. What was it?
Oh, sorry, automated tools. Do you use any testing tools?
I tend not to use them a lot. I find the WebAIM one fairly helpful for just getting a quick look at some of the major sins that have been committed. But I'm much more inclined to see how the screen reader behaves.
Yeah, fair enough.
Now when I write a review of a site, I will always sort of put a thing at the top saying, I'm not testing for color contrast, I'm not testing for keyboard navigation, because we're just using a screen reader, there are things that can very easily slip through. So no, most of the time I would be just relying on what's being presented and looking at source code as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Raf, you live in the world of testing all day, every day. Do you use tools, and how do they work with ARIA?
Yes, but there are general tools not only for ARIA. For instance, sometimes I use OB, I think it's called OB. It was in the past called Purple Hat, probably.
I've never heard of that one.
Yes, many people never heard about it, but it's quite a useful tool, and it's also accessible. It's called OOBEE probably, and the previous name was Purple Hat. It's made in Singapore, and it's free. It's full automated, so it gives you results. Of course, you may have false positives, so you need to check. And I quite like Accessibility Insights add-on, which
yeah.
shows you quite many things.
Yeah, cool. And by the way, there are many, many testing tools out there.
Too many.
Yeah, but if you're starting out, I think they're really good things just to help you get started. Sarah's great point about, I think people as they get more advanced, they move away from tools. But as a beginner, Microsoft Insights, Axe tools, all these tools actually can help you get started helping to identify issues until you get more confident. Cool. Oh, here's a nice one. This is for all three of you. By the way, there's a lot of comments in chat. I'm not listening to any of them because I'm a terrible human being. But hopefully Bree's noting them down. But here's one for all three of you. What are the trickiest ARIA role states and properties to test effectively?
I'll start if you like.
Far away.
For me, it's the ARIA Live ones. In that, is the information being presented correctly, timely, and all that sort of stuff? Is the right information being delivered? Because I'm a simple person, my stuff tends to be fairly simple. So normally I just replace everything in the div with the new information, so it makes it pretty easy. But yeah, just it needs to just to make sure that it's working. The other one, and I ran into a problem with this one only a couple of weeks ago, is ARIA expanded equals true or false, and it's a very useful thing. I'm a big fan of expanding and contracting menus. That work very nicely when done correctly, and using ARIA expanded equals true or false saves a bit of writing of JavaScript, not a lot, but a little bit, so it's handy. And I'm writing this thing where I'm expanding and contracting menus, but then within particular elements, I'm expanding and contracting something else. And it must be a timing issue, but the screen reader wouldn't report the collapsed state when it should have, and I finished up having to go back and just do the whole thing by changing the image and putting alt text on the image. So that was one, and it seems to be when it's a timing issue.
Okay, you've touched on something. I loved your comment about ARIA Live. I'd love your thoughts on this. No one should touch ARIA Live unless they understand ARIA Atomic, because those things go hand in hand. So that's one big one. But I might throw to the other two, going back to the question, which is, what are the trickiest roles, states, and properties for both of you to test effectively, or even just maybe implement? Maybe Sara, then Raf.
For me, it's, as Andrew mentioned, live regions. They're definitely tricky. I don't know if ARIA Notify, the API, is going to change that, or how much it's going to change that in the future, because it's going to help us get rid of some of those screen reader only, air quotes, screen reader only divs and spans that we have, that we also populate with text. So the whole idea of having a live region in the markup and then populating it, and how much time you have between adding the live region, if you're adding it dynamically, and then populating it, that also affects whether the screen reader is going to announce it or not. And the whole thing with live regions as well is that screen readers may choose to subscribe to some notifications, but not others. And then you have screen reader users who may choose to enable or disable some live regions. So you can't really guarantee. So live regions are more like suggestions, and you can't really guarantee that they're going to be announced to users the way you intend to. And that's why I find that the best way to work around that is to avoid live regions in all the scenarios that you can avoid live regions in. So one of the examples where many developers who build, for example, single page applications use live regions is when they change the view on the page. For example, if you're moving from one page to another, but without, I don't know if they changed the URL or not, but if you click on the link and it changes the overall view on the page, what they do is they think that the best way to announce that change is to use a live region. Whereas, in my opinion, the best way to do that is to move focus to the H1 of the new page instead, keyboard focus. I love using moving keyboard focus where appropriate. So even with form validation, a lot of developers will rely on live regions for form validation. What I prefer is providing a list of all the errors in the form on submission, and you move your keyboard focus to that area or to that container that contains the list of errors, and every item in the list of errors links to the form field that needs correction.
Here.
So I think the best way is to avoid live regions where you can avoid them. They definitely still have their use cases. So if you're building a chat log or something like that, but for many or a large percentage of the use cases that developers use live regions for, the best, I think, sometimes you don't need any live regions at all. Keyboard focus, sometimes providing instructions, like if you have a filter on the page, a bunch of filters, and the user can check them or uncheck them and select them in order to filter a list of items on the page. It may be appropriate in that case. Now, I know there are different opinions here because some screen reader users may prefer to have a polite live region announce that some change has happened. But if you can't test that effectively, or if you're unsure about it, maybe providing an instruction. I think the WCAG quick reference guide has that. So you have the filters on the left side of the page, and there is an instruction at the top that says that filter or the results are going to filter as you type or when you check certain filters on in this form. So yeah, live regions are the trickiest for me to test. And personally, for me, as a developer here speaking, not as a teacher, basically something that I'm still learning is role application as well. So when screen readers switch modes, if you're also not really familiar with how to use a screen reader and how to use these different screen reader modes, you can get stuck testing what you're trying to improve. So I find that one tricky as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for that. There are two wonderful answers there because I agree with you completely. I love when you on single page apps, when you send it just to the heading, beautiful, simple solution, back to the heading, and change the document title too while you're there. So they're out there.
Totally,
and
yes.
the top of the form for errors. Love that. But let's go to Raf, because again, you live in this world. I'll repeat the question. What is the trickiest R role states and properties to test effectively? And you're on the ground every day. So what's your take?
I will not be original. ARIA Live.
Say that again. I missed that.
I said that I will not be original. ARIA Live.
Okay,
Live region.
Right.
Almost everything was said. I will only add that sometimes also accessibility experts have different opinion whether something should be live region or not, or sometimes you really need to think quite deep to decide whether ARIA Live polite or assertive should be used, because it's not always it is so obvious. So, but generally I agree with Sara. Before you use a live region, think twice or thrice or 4 times.
Love it. And I'll make sure you answer the next testing question first, so you don't have to say everyone else has covered it. But yeah, that's great. The next question is for Andrew first, but love the other ones. From the perspective of people, and this is for Raf as well, obviously, from the perspective of people who use assistive technology, I can't even speak now. From the perspective of people who use assistive technologies, what happens when ARIA is misapplied? Now, you did talk about application, so I presume, Andrew, this is where you're going back to?
Oops, I was in the wrong place. When it's misapplied, yes, it can, we've touched on it before, you can either get something very verbose or you get locked out altogether. Some years ago, I was testing a site and there was a table, and the table was being used appropriately. The software was, I won't mention the name of the company because I don't know if they've fixed it since.
Oh, you can mention it. Bree has got unlimited budget if she's sued.
Right, okay,
she's got millions in the bag, so feel free to mention. Is it okay, Bree? Don't do it.
This was a development tool, and I couldn't get the screen readers to work on this table. They kept switching into forms mode, so I couldn't navigate the table. And for those not familiar with screen readers and tables, there are specific commands to move around the table so that the header, the information on the top row, for example, if that's the heading, gets announced as you go through the cells. And it tells you which cell you're in, all that good stuff. wouldn't do anything. And JAWS in particular just kept switching into forms mode. And I looked at the source code, and here it was, role equals application. And my colleague who was writing the stuff, I mentioned it to him. So he took it out, and it worked properly. He sent a note to the people who wrote this software. And he said, look, I've had input from an expert. That was a little lie, but anyway. He said, you shouldn't be using it. And they wrote back and said, yes, we should. So whether it's been fixed in the ensuing years, but yeah, that's the sort of thing. Yeah, if that's put in there by default by a developer, then the problem just persists and persists.
Maybe they just don't know. Like it has a massive impact, doesn't it? That one.
Yeah. Well, and reading. I mean, really, I think reading the specs for ARIA, well, for HTML generally, I suspect, is a great cure for insomnia. It's pretty tough reading to get your head around exactly what it's doing, and for me to really understand it, I've got to write something and put it in there. I mean, I was a bit distracted a while ago because I had to rush off and have a look at ARIA Atomic. I had to get my head around. I mean, if developers don't really understand this stuff, then they're going to misuse it.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. I'm going to throw to Raf now because I want you to answer a question first, which is how can developers and testers build empathy for real-world impact of incorrect ARIA?
Training, and meeting with people with disabilities to see how assistive technology take advantage of ARIA and what bad ARIA means.
Perfect answer. By the way, those who don't know, I drag Andrew to every company I ever go to, along with Judith, who has cerebral palsy. And so I always bring people with disabilities along, and there's nothing more impactful than meeting people and getting to chat to them. So yeah, I love that. What about you, Sara?
I was also going to say education/training. Basically, the best way is to teach developers about these things. I also came across the idea of empathy labs recently. I don't remember which company it was, but they had this video showcasing the empathy lab that they built. And they had so many different kinds of assistive technology emulators, basically. So as developers, we can get some emulators in the browsers, or if you're using a browser specific for developers like Polypane, I'm not paid to say this, but Polypane is a really great browser for developers because it also comes with a lot of built-in tools that help you emulate different disabilities, whether they are color disabilities or others. Tools, empathy labs. If you can't, as a developer, talk to a person with a disability and learn from them directly, I think empathy labs are a great way to start doing that. Maybe conferences can also offer something like that when the events are held, which is also helpful because a lot of developers, and myself included, we sometimes want to try something out or want to talk to more people with disabilities, but we don't have access to them. So one thing that we can do also, in addition to using tools and emulators, we can also talk to people with disabilities on social media or in accessibility Slack channels. They want to help us help them. They want to help us do better. And we can get a lot of help from them, but sometimes you need deeper testing sessions, and you can't expect to get that kind of feedback from people with disabilities for free or on social media. So services like Fable also exist, which you can also hire in order to get people with disabilities from their team to test your work for you. But whether or not you can afford it will also depend on your budget and how much you can pay, because it can be a little out of budget for a lot of independent developers. The best way is training, empathy labs, tools, and the best way is to talk to people with disabilities and to see them use your work.
Love it. This one's for any of you. No one's put your name against it. How do you involve users with disability? Sorry. Yes, far away.
Quick comment.
Yes.
The others have covered it, particularly with the emphasis on training. Recently, there was a page that I was asked to do some feedback on, and it was a page where people had to submit problems they were having with their computers and so forth. So a pretty important page, and it's ghastly. So someone said to me, could you do a video with the screen reader chatting and describing what you're doing and what's going wrong? And that was hopefully helpful. In fact, the feedback was that, yes, people were a bit concerned about it. I don't think they fixed it yet, but yeah, I think that sort of demonstrating what goes wrong, I think, can be very helpful. Quite apart from what the others have already covered, but yeah, a demonstration either in person or a video just showing what's making it break, and particularly useful for people who frankly should know better, and it probably is a wake-up call for them.
Yeah, love it. Cool. I'm going to jump around to keep you all on your toes now because you're far too comfortable. Looking ahead, what improvements in ARIA in general or testing we'd like to see from browsers or assistive technologies? This is for any of you. You're all too polite.
You mean testing or using or what?
Oh, well, because you've got a background in testing, why don't we say testing now? So looking ahead, what improvements to ARIA testing then would you like to see from browsers or assistive techs? And you can fire away, Andrew.
I think that sooner or later AI will make most of the test based on code. So I expect this change, and I think it would be very useful, and it will save a lot of time.
Cool. Sarah, Andrew, any comments?
Knowing that.
Sorry, Sarah.
No, go ahead, Andrew.
No, you go.
Okay, thank you. Seeing that I spend most of my time in the browser and that I think about education a lot, I think that if browsers could do something like add more educational hints or whatever to the browser dev tools, or basically any chance or any place that you can teach developers a little bit more, or maybe if kind of building testing into the browser, but testing that also comes with education at the same time. So instead of just pointing out that there might be an issue in this thing that you're using, provide suggestions or maybe links to resources. I think there was something similar to this. I'm not sure if it was for CSS at some point, where you could get tooltips or whatever it is that the browser used to show a little bit more information about the property or the value that you're using, with links to MDN resources to read more. This off the top of my head, I can't think of much more. Yeah. Knowing, of course, because I don't use automated tools that much.
Yeah, cool. Andrew.
I shouldn't have let you go first because you said what I wanted to say.
That's okay. What do you all think? Oh, no, you go. Sorry, keep going, Andrew.
I've argued for a long while that all browsers, and I've lost this argument, but all browsers should reject invalid code. So if you don't escape your
XHTML 1.0, do you remember that time? You had to be strict.
Yeah. So no, because it won't happen. But yeah, if the code's invalid, then the browser says, no, I'm not going to render this. So given that that's not going to happen, well, exactly. Yeah, it shouldn't be that forgiving. If you get it wrong, just stop. It'd be nice if the browser could pick up either where ARIA has been, well, certainly where it's redundant would be a starting point, and could flag that so that the developer could say, oh, that looks bad.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah, I think that's where they could be helpful if they picked up obvious duplication, extra verbosity, etc. I think that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, love it.
But Andrew, this would mean the end of the internet.
Is that a bad thing? Really?
I mean, if the browsers rejected invalid code, this would
90% of the
mean
web would disappear immediately.
yes, exactly.
Yeah,
And
that's
for
my
instance,
point. Yeah.
but you couldn't buy tickets online and things like that.
Oh, if they wrote it properly, it'd work. Yeah.
I think
But
we're going. Oh, sorry.
I have one more I have one more comment
Yeah,
because
far away.
I asked you whether you mean testing or using. So from the user perspective,
Yes.
it would be good if, for instance,
Well, you don't leave us hanging like this.
all
Oh,
HTML. So it's another problem. For instance, you have it's not related to ARIA, but for instance, you have these micro tags for time, for instance, when you can encode the time format, etc. And for instance, those does not support it. This information is useless when someone encodes it in a page. So here I would expect a change, and it would be really great if screen readers supported all that is available.
I guess what we need though, the browser needs to to know if it's the developer who's running the page or whether it's an end user. Because if it's the developer, the browser needs to tell that person what they've done wrong. If it's an end user, then perhaps it might try to fix it. But yeah, that's where it gets messy.
Now we're getting into mind reading and probably going down a dark path.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, we're going to ask our first user question. That's how much we care about you. We've been an hour in and we're just getting to your questions. So this one's from Anna, and you probably asked it, at 5 o'clock, and it's now 7 o'clock. But Anna's question is, some ARIA roles and properties have notoriously bad support by the browsers and assistive technology for years, even decades. Is there light at the end of the tunnel? And I would first say that no, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. There's only death. But I might throw to the others to see what do you think? Anyone like to answer this?
I think one of the examples is ARIA Controls. Because, if ARIA Controls were supported the way it was intended to be supported across screen readers, it would make our job as developers a little bit easier and give us a little bit more flexibility. So if you're creating, for example, a simple disclosure widget, which is an example that Andrew mentioned earlier, you can use ARIA Expanded to indicate whether, if you have a button and you have a thing that the button controls, ARIA Expanded is going to tell the screen reader whether the thing that is being controlled is expanded or collapsed. But the thing is, the whole idea with ARIA Controls is you could have a button at the beginning of a page, and the thing that it controls could be at the end of the page. And the screen reader would then provide, if you use ARIA Controls on the button, a screen reader would provide a way for the user to jump to that thing that you just opened, and then provide you with a way to go back to the button that opened it. But that's not how ARIA Controls currently works. And I think Hayden Pickering's article, ARIA is Poop, is the perfect documentation of the or lack of support for ARIA Controls the way it was intended to be. Now, whether or not there is light at the end of the tunnel, I don't know. So the current recommendation is if you have a button that controls something, make sure that that thing comes right after the button in the DOM so that the user can navigate, screen readers can navigate to it directly without having to look for it on the page. And keyboard users can, if the thing contains interactive elements, keyboard users can navigate to those elements directly. Whether or not that's going to change, I don't think so. Based on discussions that I've been seeing, there doesn't seem like to be like anything's going to change about that. Newer implementations of things like the popover API and others have been working around this. So you need to make sure that the tooltip or the popover that you're building comes after the button that controls it in the DOM. And then they're creating I think it's an ARIA details relationship between them. So instead of using ARIA controls, whether or not there's light at the button. So ARIA is a living standard, meaning that things could change, but for currently available properties or attributes that don't have great support, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows if this is going to change, because browser support, maybe browsers could agree on a specific or implementation for all of them, but assistive technologies are not the same. You can't guarantee that a screen reader is going to support a feature or an ARIA attribute the same way other screen readers are going to support it.
Raf, what's your thoughts? I'll repeat the question. What is your, where is it? I've lost it. Here it is. Some ARIA rules and properties have notorious bad support for browser and assistive technology for years. Is there light at the end of the tunnel?
Actually, you said what I wanted to say, that there is no light. So
Oh, did you already say that? I missed that. Sorry.
you took my words, because I would also say that there's no light in the tunnel. I will change my utterance, so I will say that every light will finally diminish.
Oh,
But
I love that.
but being serious, actually, Sara said everything. What I would say, I fully agree with you, Sara. At the same time, I think that now, thanks to AI, accessibility is changing. So many problems that were big in the past now are smaller and smaller. So there is possible that there will be time when actually ARIA won't be needed, because some AI tools will make content accessible.
Okay, cool. Andrew, any comments on lights and tunnels and existential dread before we move on?
What does a consultant do when he sees light at the end of the tunnel?
What does a consultant do?
He orders more tunnel.
Excellent stuff.
No, I can't add anything more sensible than that.
Cool. Okay, Anna has another question. Anna, are you still on the call, or did you die waiting for these questions to be answered? I hope you're still here. Anna's asked the next question, which is, what is your view on ARIA Live issue with automated translation services? Sometimes it's the easiest way for developers to add accessible names comparing to other methods. Would anyone like to answer that one? That's a curly one.
I have like a couple of thoughts. I do wish ARIA Label translation for ARIA Label was better supported. We don't have any control over translation tools, so we have to make do with what we got. But this brings us back to the accessible name computation algorithm.
Oh, frozen.
Name. Yeah, I was just going to ask, can you hear me now?
Yes, well, you're back. Sorry, say that again.
Okay, what did you hear last?
Oh, I can't remember. Start the sentence again.
Okay, I'll just repeat that, yeah. So ARIA Label is the easiest, sometimes often the easiest way to add an accessible name to an element, but we cannot control translation services. We don't know if and how or when support for translation of ARIA Label is going to improve. Until then, it helps developers to be familiar with the accessible name computation algorithm, which we've mentioned a couple of times before. Because sometimes, let's say you have, which is a very common occurrence, if you have a form, you have an input and you have a label, and the label is not associated with the input using the foreign ID attributes, what many developers will, the first thing that they will think of is to add ARIA label on that input, and which has the same value as the text inside the label element. But instead of doing that, because ARIA label does not translate well, and since the label is already there in the DOM, you could use ARIA labeled by instead, which means that you will get the accessible name for the input and the text is going to translate, hopefully. And ideally, most elements that should have accessible names should also have visible labels on the page. And if the label is already there on the page, you might as well link to that and provide it as an accessible name to the element using ARIA labeled by instead of ARIA label.
Can we just stop there and just pause on that beautiful comment? Can I circle back and like, why is ARIA labeled by better? You've actually just hinted at it there, but there's a reason why ARIA label could be better than ARIA labeled by better than ARIA label.
Okay, so ARIA labeled by in the accessible name computation algorithm is going to override. So if you have both ARIA label and ARIA labeled by is going to win. But the main advantage here is you would be feeding two birds with the same scone. You have visible label on the page. You can ensure that you have visible label on the page, which helps users, pretty much everyone, especially speech control users, because they can see the label of the thing that they're trying to activate. And you can associate that with the control using ARIA labeled by. And the second thing is there is no translation problem there because the text is real text in the markup. It's not text inside of an attribute. Yeah, so it's going to translate just fine. It should translate just fine.
Yeah, cool. Does anyone have anything to add to that? The other thing is
just a comment that,
sorry.
Even when you have pages that are not automatically translated, developers quite often forget to translate, to take care that accessible names should be translated.
Excellent stuff. I think Bree's been wanting to give away huge cash prizes. So I think now's the time to answer you in chat for huge cash prizes. Bree has no money at all. But which one would win? By the way, it's been hinted at already. If you were to put a name on a link, which one's going to win? The link text itself, the title, ARIA Label, or ARIA Label by? And I want you to put them in order in chat. You have to work for your money. Fire away, people. And that includes you, Sean. I know you could answer that in your sleep. And we'll keep going while we're waiting. This one's actually from Sean. I haven't been keeping up on the status of the Accessibility Object Model AOM. But what tools, if any, exist to catch regression in their code, browsers, or screen readers if they've had to resort to using ARIA in their applications? That's a long question. Would people like me to repeat that? Or Sean, do you want to come off mic and just say it how you'd like?
Yes, I would love to rephrase that.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I was just brain dumping. So I'm a developer, fix lots of bugs with accessibility, been doing it for years. The thing that always stresses me out is that I don't feel confident that it's not going to regress in the next week, month. In a big distributed team, I can never expect that everyone's going to be doing the thing right. Also, it's very common for a new browser version or a new release of VoiceOver, JAWS, NVDA to break things that we've already built. I would love, my dream is to have tooling, something like Puppeteer, Playwright, WebDriver, Selenium that drives the browser. But it actually, I don't want to be relying on a library to parse the DOM and pull out and effectively do what the browser's doing when it generates its accessibility tree. I want to see that if I've created some HTML, what has the browser formed that into in its accessibility tree? Then correspondingly, what is the screen reader if I've got some kind of setup with, maybe we had a thing where we had NVDA that you could log its text to a text file. So, and then we were making assertions on that. It was very flaky, but it gave me some, helped me sleep at night. But it feels like this is a missing piece of the puzzle from developers. It feels like I would love for there to be some more robust, we can't even just access the accessibility tree by JavaScript or something like that. There's dev tools you can do it in, but I want an automated way that runs every time I commit something. Does anyone know of any, movement happening in that space?
I would answer no, but I'd love, Sarah, you're more deep in the developer space than me.
I don't think there's anything like that yet. And I'm also thinking about how that would work, knowing that browsers on the same platform might support, or depending on platforms, support multiple accessibility APIs, which means that the information exposed in the accessibility tree may be different. So the accessibility tree is not the same across all browsers. And even the same browser could generate different accessibility trees for different accessibility APIs. So I think that this would be a very tricky tool to build.
Yeah. Rafal, Andrew, any other comments to that one?
That's why
no comments.
All good. Well, believe it or not, Sean had the next question. Hopefully this one is a little bit less highbrow. I've had to use one for live regions. I've had to use one for combo box components because the browser AT support was incomplete or broken. We ended up using a React library, which actually injected 2 live regions, which would alternate which region a message was injected in because screen readers would occasionally ignore updates. Is that a question, or just are you venting some PTSD?
I think if it started with a Q, it was a question. I think that was just my. That was a passive comment when people were talking about multiple live regions on a page. And it was more just sometimes there's been a need to it. I think it was maybe a verbosity setting in VoiceOver that was preventing updates. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. The next one. By the way, whoever's writing these are essays in chat, which is hard for me to read as someone with dyslexia. But these poor people have to try and work out like a 200-word question here.
Sorry,
So
it's probably most me.
no, I don't think this one's you. It's not.
Sorry.
It's more than you. So do you think there's value in giving developers finer grained control over the accessibility tree rather than just a handful of roles? Let's stop that one there. I don't know whether that was you again, Sean. It doesn't have your name attached to it. But what do people think? Raf, what's your thoughts? Sorry.
No, I was going to ask, like what? I mean, using ARIA and HTML already, the browser is already going to get a lot of information and add that to the accessibility tree. What kind of information do you think is missing in the accessibility tree that developers would want to add? I don't know if I'm understanding the question correctly or not.
Yeah, sorry. It was more rather than giving. So we have a lot of attributes like label, label by, and the title, and then there's a page for ARIA role description, and the second result in Google is avoid ARIA role description. Sorry, ARIA described by. Sorry, ARIA description.
Yeah, there is ARIA description and there is ARIA described by.
Yeah, so but both like in the top page of the results is like why to avoid it. I think Adrian's got a blog post on both of them, I think. But more like instead of having these attributes, if we just had like a generic thing that, because like usually when you focus on an element, it's going to read the name, role, value, and then a pause and then your description. Could we not just expose those plugs for regardless of the elements, and just instead of having to people that learn, you could have a state update, like if it's checked or pressed, for example, but just have some generic ones that just inject into the buffer for that element, regardless of, if it's the first part of the what the screen reader announces or the subsequent part. So
Wait, so the question is whether or not you can control how the screen reader announces or the order of announcements by a screen reader?
More like giving people more of a generic, like what the accessibility tree, exposing just simple things like a name, role, value, and a description, rather than label, label by, role description, and a bunch of different attributes. Just maybe make them more generic.
I'm a huge fan of the KISS principle. That is, keep it simple, stupid. And I think that you're almost trying to be too clever. And I wouldn't be trying to. The further you push those sort of parameters, the more the risk of things breaking would be my comment. And if you're doing something that's that complicated, it's probably better to go back and put it into a more simple process, or perhaps two processes after each other or something.
Cool. I would plug one little tool for you. I don't know whether anyone follows. I think it's Ian Lloyd, and he builds these amazing bookmarklets. And one of them is called the WT Focus Bookmarklet. I don't know whether everyone's seen it, but basically you can just tab through the page, and it brings up a beautiful little simple dialogue, and it just shows you the accessible name, the role, and the description of that object. And it's like a gateway drug to the accessibility tree. Basically, he's just taking stuff out of the accessibility tree and putting in a nice little panel. I don't know whether that answers your question, Sean, but there are sort of things that give a simplified view of it, if that makes sense. Cool. Okay, I might throw out to the group here what's been missing. So I might start with Sara. If you had another 5 minutes, what would you want to gush? Oh, you don't have my 5 minutes, but they'll give you 2 minutes. What would you like to gush to people? Like your closing wrap-up message here, apart from the fact that we both love the accessibility tree and the naming, the order naming thing, what would you like to get across to people?
Learn to fall in love with HTML again. HTML comes first. HTML is the foundation of everything. And then education, learn, get familiar with ARIA attributes, what they do, what they don't do. Add them only when they're needed. But yeah, my emphasis always goes back to HTML, because ARIA is a very helpful tool, but ARIA attributes provide accessibility primitives, so to speak. They have their use cases, but they can only do so much. You can get most of the work done when it comes to semantics with native HTML elements. And even HTML, use HTML the way it is intended to be used. So even semantic HTML can be written inaccessibly, so to speak. So if you write the label element and you have an input and you don't associate them with each other, the label is not going to be exposed as a label to that input to assistive technologies. Relationships between different elements, get the foundations right, and then move on to ARIA and learn. It's I don't care how good AI is going to get in the future. There is nothing better than you understanding exactly what's happening, knowing how it helps you fix issues when they come up, gives you confidence, the skills. Nothing trumps that, in my opinion. So focus on HTML, and then on ARIA, and then on CSS. Separation of concerns, I'm still a huge proponent of that. There has been some discussion recently on whether the separation of concerns should still be that relevant in today's, basically today, on the web. I do think it should be. I'm not going to go on a tangent here, but especially with all the new CSS stuff coming and the accessibility API, accessibility API mappings that are affected by that, and that's like a whole different topic for another day.
Raf, what would you like to wrap up with? What's your key message for people?
Sara put it, Sara put it perfectly. Learn to love HTML again, and I have nothing to add.
Love it. I love that message. Andrew, you have to go off on a tangent here. You have to add some spice to the end of the meeting. What's your thoughts?
I'm not sure about spice, but some of the testing is pretty straightforward. Load the page, tab through it. Does that work? If you can't tab through it,
that's a great way.
You're falling at the first hurdle. Have a look at the thing. So some years ago, I was reviewing a site, and my boss walked across the floor to ask me a question, and from 3 meters away, he said, "That color contrast is hopeless." Now, I mean, he picked it from that distance. Now, how come the developer didn't realize? The developer probably thought it looked cute, but I mean, for goodness sake, have a think about who your audience is. Tab through the page. Have a look at the at the presentation of the page. Does it work? Have a crack at a screen reader. I remember someone in a session a couple of years ago made the comment that when they ran NVDA over a page, they picked up by using it 95% of the errors on the page before they start doing anything else. So screen readers, because screen readers really do rely on semantic HTML, semantic everything, if you stray from that, they're likely to have problems. But I don't for a moment want to suggest that screen readers are the only in town. And you've already touched on that, Russ. But people using speech input, people using mouse emulation devices, the keyboard alone. I think that's one that often gets overlooked, and it's so easy to test for.
Love it. Well, I'm going to throw to Bree. Sean, it has to be a super, super quick question.
It's not a question. I just exactly what Andrew was just saying. I used to carry a square rectangular like a bar coaster, like a drink coaster around, and that was my accessibility thing. And I'd put it on the trackpad of the designers and developers things so they could not use the trackpad. And I'd say, okay, now go. I was working at Atlassian, go do that thing in Confluence or Jira, and it was like forcing them. I used to use a pair of scissors and cut their mice, but wireless mice took that away. But
I love that, and I love the idea of punishing designers because they're all evil human beings. Over to you, Bree, to wrap up. You're on mute, by the way, if you're talking.
Sorry, there we go. I was actually swearing at you, Russ, but it was on mute.
I'm used to it.
Thank you so much, everyone. What an amazing session. So much to cover, such detail. As you said, we could go on till midnight tonight about so many of the questions that came through. Great questions, by the way, aligned with a lot of our pre-thinking. Really, really appreciate your time. Russ, thank you. Coming back, I've volunteered you for a few other things, but just just, check the chat later. Sara, Raf, and Andrew, again, thank you so much for your time. As I said, OZeWAI, we're a not-for-profit. We are building up the quality and the consistency of what it means to be an accessibility specialist in Australia. And we're only 2 years into this professionalisation aspect. So any support, help, volunteers, anything you can help with. Yes, we're going to make a T-shirt maybe in partnership with Sara, do some HTML quotes or something, but please consider joining OZeWAI. We love to support. We love our connections across the world with Raf and Sara as well, and love to have you here. And watch out for the new year. Lots of things happening. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording.